another edition of Ask Michael Eline. This is where I teach people the law in an unorthodox manner by using examples that we see in the news, case law briefs, but it's all about exposing the Leviathan and its instrumentalities and taking back your rights. Know the law and mean to keep it well. Come here to learn from an expert to know your right. Make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to save, because we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel.
That's right. We never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel. How's it going, guys? I'm attorney Michael Eline. I have been offline the last few days trying to get caught up on files and stuff like that. Most of you know that I primarily do personal injury, catastrophic injury law, and workers' compensation. And my love is history and common law understanding of American common law and natural law. I'm a natural law advocate, which is what our founding fathers believed in. They were followers of John Locke, and our Declaration of Independence is based upon the principles of John Locke and natural law, that our rights come from a creator, not from the government, and therefore they can't be taken away by the state, that your rights are inherent and they're given to you at birth by your creator, not some school teacher or some woke politician, for example. Good seeing you, BZ Watchdog. Good seeing you, Copser 5150, Sticky Wicked Thoughts, Jody Shiloh. So I started a little early tonight. I'm going to have Brett Pike join me in a little bit, and I'm going to become part of his affiliate program where we help parents who want to pull their kids out of these woke public schools, basically Democrat Party re-education camps for children 101, get them away from the teachers' unions and all the rainbow flag mafia, and return the power of educating children back to parents. And how do you do that? Well, you homeschool your kids. If you don't want your kids to be subject to racism, like critical race theory, where they teach one group of students that they're a victim and the other group of students that they're oppressed or that they're oppressors, or you want to have pornographic material in the libraries or sexualize kids, put tampon machines in the boys' room and have these books that teach kids how to have anal sex or whatever, then this is the show for you. This is just a common sense approach where we just restore the rights to parents, and we don't have all these woke, weirdo public school teachers trying to destroy the minds of your children. We know, based upon what the Germans did in pre-World War II Germany, it's a very similar approach. They taught in their classrooms that the Jews were their enemy and that they were the oppressors and that the Germans were the oppressed. And that's basically what critical race theory is. Now, advocates of programs like critical race theory say it's really teaching history. Well, it's really not. It's teaching people to hate each other. And we see that crimes are going up more and more against people with lighter skin, attacks on them, and, being called privileged, right, is a basis to discriminate against them. And that's all being taught on the college campuses and the public schools, and it needs to stop. And so since it's not stopping, the only other real option you have is to educate your kids yourself. And I homeschool my daughter, and she's already at an advanced level to the point where she should have her associate's degree by the time she's 16. And so it's just another beautiful thing about having your kids homeschooled. And of course, they have the safety and protection of their family. Now, today we're going to have Brett Pike come on from Classical Learner. Good seeing you, Phoenix Rising. Moderators from Team DLZ are always welcome, man. Alpha Mike, mod from Team DLZ. Right on, brother. So what I'm going to do is start the show a little early to sort of give people an intro into what's been going on in the public school system and why so many parents are fleeing California. For example, we've seen that the woke mobsters are trying to weaponize speech. If you say something they disagree with or refuse to use their pronouns or whatever, they consider that hate speech. And in California, it's gotten so bad that if parents won't go along with the woke public school teacher's viewpoint that your son is a girl or your daughter is a boy and they need to use those pronouns, you can literally have your child taken away from you. And Child Protective Services will aid in that because teachers are mandatory reporters. And so the view of the single party state of California is simply that it's hateful and it's denying the child the right to come out. So it's discriminating against them. And so the government has a right to come and take your child away if you won't go along with the school and what they want to do with your child. And we know that male public school teachers in general, per capita, have a much higher rate of assaults against young boys now than ever in the history of the public school system. It's much more per capita than the Catholic Church. And it makes sense, right? Because they're with kids, 7 to 8 hours a day. And so the big pushback that you get from people who have been educated in public schools and watch CNN and PMSNBC and all the government run media, is that, oh, but your kid won't be properly socialized. So when Brett Pike comes on today, we're going to talk about socialization. We're going to talk about socialization and how you can socialize your kids without destroying their mind and having your child become infected with the woke mind virus. We know that the Germans were experts at getting them young, put them in the Hitler Jugend, right? And they used that young, impressionable thing. And look, these teachers know these kids are young and impressionable. You could tell a little boy that he's a butterfly. And if you tell him enough, he'll think that he's a butterfly, right? So if you have some wokester going into that school, he'll have every little boy in that class convinced that he's a girl, and every little girl in that class convinced that she's a she, her, or a they, them. And that's, for me and most parents who are logical and of sound mind and body, we don't want that for our kids. Give me a bunch of ones if you don't want that for your kids either. It's up to parents to decide. Now, as an aside, I don't really care what people do with their spare time, or if guys want to dress up like girls and wear dresses and play make-believe. I don't care. I don't have any angst against them for doing any of that. What I don't want and what I don't approve of is them doing it around my kids, to my kids, in a public school, or any school for that matter. The children are young and impressionable, and parents deserve to know what's going on with their kids' education. And unfortunately, public school teachers, especially in California, many of them don't believe that. They believe that the schools have the right to control the minds of your children. And it reminds me so much of communist China, where when they had the Cultural Revolution, Mao Zedong made sure that he didn't distinguish between men and women. That, women had to have short hair and dress the same as men. Took away the femininity from women and took away the masculinity from men to create basically a single gender, for lack of a better word. And we know that it's easier to control people, especially men, when they're on female hormones or atrazine, right, which they put in our food now. So what I'm going to do tonight is advocate on behalf of parents and saving children's minds so they don't have to deal with the woke mind virus. And look, if you want to dress your little boy up like a girl or whatnot, I'm a libertarian, so I'm not going to sit here and be Hitlerian and try and take away your kid. But I think that little kids need to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, and have their parents at the forefront of educating their children with respect to the birds and the bees and all that other stuff. Give me a bunch of ones if you guys agree. Now, so many people say that homeschooling is a terrible thing because it doesn't allow your kids to be properly socialized. Well, I beg your pardon. I don't want my child being socialized by a far left university or public school system. That's not for me. So what we'll do is we'll play some videos to kind of get you educated on what's been going on out there, starting with this first one. And then hopefully by then, Brett should pop in here in about a half hour. And Brett Pike from Classical Learner, he's been a guest on my show before. He has one of the best homeschooling systems where they teach patriotism. They teach children how to be entrepreneurs, right? And we know that public schools churn out kids that, go to a university where they get brainwashed to be part of the basically, for lack of a better word, the blue-haired rainbow flag mafia with their safe spaces. They get worthless degrees and they end up getting jobs as baristas. At my firm, when we've hired these so-called college-educated people, we find out very quickly that they pass their exams using ChatGPT. They can't spell, they don't know grammar, and we know that the National Education Association has lowered standards so badly at the behest of the Department of Education. We have some towns in California and Oregon now who have eliminated math and reading and English because they say it's racist against Black people. And they've eliminated cursive writing and reading. So our children can't even read our founding documents unless they go to Wikipedia, for example. So what I'm advocating is a return to classical education. and critical thinking, which are two of the things that public schools lack most, unfortunately. Now, there are some good public schools, but the model, the national centralized control model, is not that model. And that is the model that controls the far left, many say Marxist run National Education Association, and for sure the California Teachers Association. Far, far left, anti-white male, anti anything that's not diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so today's show is going to sort of break down, thank you, Point Fire, some ideas for parents who want to return to a time when their children are intelligent and critical thinkers. And me personally, with my firm, my law firm, I'll walk over 10 or 20 college graduates to get my hands on a Marine Corps combat vet with no education, because I can train that individual into being a superior attorney, and I could get him to become a lawyer on the law study program, and so, or her. So that would be my choice. But we can also help you guys learn how to rear up your kids in a really nice way by using homeschooling programs like Brett Pike's Classical Learner, as well as the homeschooling program that my kids are on. And so it's just an option for parents who don't want their children being raised by the woke mafia, right? And so we've seen parents fleeing California in droves, millions of them leaving the state because they do not want this rainbow flag mafia rearing their children. And I've represented parents who have had the custody of their children threatened because they refuse to go along with the pronoun mafia. And so you guys will say that I'm making this stuff up, but no, it's the truth. California has a law that the public school teachers, since they're mandatory reporters, if the parents don't go along with the so-called pronouns or and they secretly do it. So they're allowed to, behind the parents' back, call their little boy, girl, let them wear a dress even when the parents aren't there, and then put the regular clothes back on them and send them out without advising the parents. And so we know that many, many parents, including myself, have fled the state. And we're hoping that once they finally get rid of all the illegal aliens, the census will stop redistricting the state blue. They stand to pick up about 13 new representatives because of Joe Biden's 20 million illegal aliens in blue states. So once those illegal aliens are sent home, there's a high probability that the will of the parents will come back, and maybe we'll move back to California. But in the meantime, it's a single party state, much like the Soviet Socialist Republic of China. And so in a single party state, it's basically, that's the end of all rights as we know it. You don't have any pushback. So good seeing you, Dave's channel. Yes, and absolutely. So Sir Richard talks about bringing back firearms. When I grew up, everybody had firearms. All my neighbors had firearms. I've been shooting since I was about 12 years old, had BB guns before that. I was an expert before I went into the Marine Corps. And of course, I made expert out of boot camp. And all young boys should learn self-defense and martial arts, and how to manipulate a firearm, how to clean it, how to store it, how to properly engage if you have to. So you're absolutely right. I agree with you. And now Dave says, bring back, don't ask, don't tell. I don't even really know a whole lot about that. Honestly, I don't really care about people's sexual identity. I just don't want it being forced on my kids. As a libertarian, I don't really have a problem with you doing whatever you want to do with the person you want to be with. It's when you start trying to force your ideology on my child, that's where I draw the line. Give me a bunch of ones if you guys agree. So good seeing you, Mannequin. So yeah, let's go ahead and start with the first video as we wait for Brett Pike to join me, and I'll just sort of educate you on what's going on out there in the world.
And let me just tell you, my kids are a minority group. I am Hispanic. Never once have they come home and said that they felt victimized or discriminated against because of their race or ethnicity. I've done a lot of research into this transformational equity work document, as well as Mr. Kendi's theory, radical theory, unproven, without a lot of supporting facts. And I'm deeply concerned for my kids who are in this district.
I have had over a dozen teachers reach out to me, frustrated and upset over what is being thrown their way with this transformational equity work, thanking me for speaking up for them because they can't do it themselves for fear of retaliation and possible discrimination.
Further on, the document references reducing disciplinary action by race, reviewing library books, and hiring based on race, ethnicity, gender identity, faith, sexual orientation, socioeconomic class, and age. You know what? We have fought and battled for equal rights in this country. This doesn't sound like equal rights. This sounds like we're going to go higher based on meeting a quota. And you know what? In the 80s, we played that game.
How do you increase the diversity of applicants by race? That is illegal. The diversity of hiring should be based on applicants' ability to excel at their job, regardless of their skin color. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they good for the job? Are they bad for the job? And to sit here and make a goal about increasing it by race is illegal. And if that goal is absurd, and if HR does not understand it, they should be replaced immediately.
These teachers are already stressed out, overwhelmed, underappreciated, and now the district, with implementation of this TEW, will pit parents against teacher and students against students.
And let me just tell you, my kids are a minority group. I am Hispanic. Never once have they come home and said that they felt victimized or discriminated against because of their race or ethnicity. Do you want to know why? Because my children are taught at home the value of people, that you treat people the way that their character and integrity defines them in your view. That is not a place for the district or the board to impose a leftist, and yes, I'm going to make it political because that's exactly what this document is.
It's far
A
left,
leftist
communist.
rhetoric that has no place in our schools. So I know that we can make public requests for information. I want to know how many complaints the district has received from parents of minority children about this topic that makes it so heavy in the forefront above their academic skills like math, reading, all of those things.
So I drafted the equity statement and I chose to use the definition of anti-racism by Kendi.
What a joke.
I don't pretend to know everything or
You don't
have
know
all the
anything.
solutions,
You don't
but
know
I
anything.
can look to others and not reinvent the wheel. I chose to propose this definition of anti-racist because it struck a chord with me personally
Of course, with you
and
personally,
spoke
because you're
to
a commie.
taking action instead of just sitting by and remaining complicit with the gap in discipline and achievement in our district.
Oh, God.
Well, you don't need to convince me because everybody in this room knows exactly, and you're just revealing that it's all about your personal
That's
feelings,
right.
which
It's all
I
about
don't
her.
think anybody out here tax-paying parents are at all interested in. And they're kind of appalled that our school is going in that direction instead of teaching their kids math, reading, true history, character, how to be good citizens, how to be productive to society so they can have happy lives instead of going around whining, complaining. The governing board is responsible to the people of the district, not their own personal experiences, and therefore should be aware of the opinions and attitudes of the community instead of shutting up somebody that expresses them in a board meeting when it's on the agenda, and as representatives of the people who own and support the schools and accept the responsibility to identify community attitudes instead of scorning somebody at a meeting.
You're not going to tell me that your efforts are better focused on something like Kendi's theory than on my child's academic success. That is not what you're here for. That is not what the educators are here for. And they should not be burdened with shouldering that when the public hasn't had an opportunity to be a part of that process. That is not what you were elected to do. And just as the gentleman said that in June we have an opportunity to recall members of the board, I'd like to ask those of you who stand with me to support my efforts in recalling the members of the board who are proposing this product, as they call it.
Absolutely. So this is the problem, is we have, so basically that's just part of it. So critical race theory is based on what's called critical theory. And so we know that most of the news media and pretty much every college campus is dominated by far left Marxists who hate capitalism, who hate America. And they were unable to sell critical theory, which was based upon your success. So if you were successful and you made a lot of money, the communists don't like that. They want everyone to be equally miserable. And so they couldn't sell that. So what they've done is they've done a great job by forcing it on our schools with these college liberals who are now school teachers, right? To get a teaching credential so they can get their hands on the brains of your child, many say. And so because of that, that's called critical race theory. And it teaches that white people, especially white males, are oppressors, and Asians as well are oppressors. Basically, anyone with a high IQ, a traditional European work value system is considered to be an oppressor. And actually, they also teach that merit-based promotions are racist. And so that's what they teach. And they've sold this to many inner city minorities as being true. And that is the goal, to create division. It's a very divisive thing. It's very hateful. And so as a result, you have, just like the Hitler Youth had in Nazi Germany, they told all of the German kids that the Jews were their oppressors, right? And they told all the Jewish kids that, the Germans were oppressed, and to guilt them and shame them. And that's what they do right now. And we're seeing attacks up against little kids of the wrong race because they're privileged, right? And so it's a violent thing. Anytime you tell someone they're oppressed and that I'm their oppressor, it invites violence. Of course, you're going to want to fight back because you feel like you're being discriminated against. And in a nutshell, that's critical race theory. Okay. Give me a bunch of ones if you understand what that means. Good seeing you, Life Under the Microscope, out freaking standing. Now, let's get into what's going on with some other things. So they're not just pushing critical race theory. The left is also pushing this pronoun thing. People suffering from gender dysphoria need to be put on a pedestal and worshiped now with drag queen story hour. And they want to force this on our kids. And parents like me said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm pulling my kid out of school. I'm going to homeschool him. There's no way that I'm going to let my child be subject to that stuff. It's crazy. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree. Now, so it's a two-tiered attack on the minds of children, say many parents. And that is one of the main reasons why business owners and parents are fleeing the state of California in record numbers, because most people have children because they want to pass on all the gifts and things that they didn't get as children. But they also want to pass on the good things that they got as children, like discipline, patriotism, respect for your neighbors, respect for your elders, not judging people by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, like the original Martin Luther King Jr. taught. And by the way, his philosophy is soundly rejected by the critical race theorists and the woke mafia. So let's go into the next video, and you guys can get another understanding of what's going on out there, because it's really shocking that many people have no idea about what's going on out there with these public schools. It's really shocking. I mean, people they're working so hard trying to pay their outrageous tax bills so they can pay off the debt service on the loans that our country borrowed using fiat currency, worthless money, right? And so all the money we pay in taxes, most of you may not know, goes to pay debt service pretty much. So you're paying debt service. And so the services that you're getting, well, even if you're getting them, not so good if you've got to deal with a minority thinker who rejects everything that you believe in, teaching your kid. Now, one thing I do want to tell you is Malcolm X made a very profound statement. Why would you let your enemy teach your kids? Why would you let your enemy teach your kids? Malcolm X. Check it out sometime, guys. So let's get into what's going on in the schools, and we'll keep on going.
City of Hudson, a battle over a textbook has led the mayor to call for the entire school board to step down. It's a dust-up that's now getting international attention. Sarah Shookman explains the outrage and what's being done now.
642 Things to Write About is a paperback journal that's been used to supplement a senior writing course in Hudson for the last 5 years. But this week, a number of the prompts got parents' attention.
Write a sex scene you wouldn't show your mom. Rewrite the sex scene from above into one that you'd let your mom read. Drink a beer. Write about the taste. Write an X-rated Disney scenario. I hope each and every one of you is as uncomfortable as I am after reading that.
I was appalled when my wife showed me and read to me a few nights ago what our kids were being exposed to.
A handful of parents and students spoke up at Monday's school board meeting.
The first day we got it, within 10 minutes of us getting this book, all of us around the room had already found the things out.
Hudson's Mayor Craig Schubert took it a step further, calling it a crime.
It has come to my attention that your educators are distributing essentially what is child pornography. So I'm going to give you a simple choice. You either choose to resign from this Board of Education or you will be charged. Thank you.
A district spokeswoman says the book is one of several used in a College Credit Plus course taught by a Hudson teacher working alongside Hiram College. To register their students, parents must sign a form indicating mature content might be discussed. The school responded, though, collecting all the books and investigating if any other consequences are coming, but board members won't be stepping down. President David Zuro sent us a statement saying, in part, while we respect the mayor's position within the city of Hudson, the supervision of the public schools of this district is the responsibility of the Board of Education. And at this time, no Board of Education member has indicated any intention to resign.
Of course not.
Well, it's not clear if any crime was committed. None of those topics had been assigned to students, but Russ, the district is looking into its process for approving such books, these supplemental materials, as they call them. And we did hear back from the mayor today, who said he was too busy with some other duties to talk with us, but he would make time next week.
That'll be interesting.
National attention, NBC covering it, and now the British newspapers have picked it up as well.
Yeah, I think there's a, it's a pretty big headline that they might be.
So I get a lot of calls from parents who want to sue their school boards, and they're just so upset. But what you have to understand is that the teachers' unions and most public school teachers come from these far left universities. And they've been taught that basically critical race theory is good, white people are bad, transgenderism is amazing, kids need to come out of the closet, and they think that it's their job to transform the minds of your children to be good little woke Marxist Democrats. They really do believe that. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree with that. I definitely see that happening based upon hundreds of phone calls I've gotten from parents over the last few years. And in my conversations, I've simply said, look, you control the minds of your children. Why would you have them in a public school when you know that that's happening? Fighting the school board's not going to do anything. We just saw an example of a case where none of those wokesters who are trying to put pornographic material into public school libraries, none of them are going to step down. And their teachers' unions are so powerful. Good luck getting them out of office. You can try to elect people to the school board, but the school boards are just far, far left, and it's really, really difficult. Most people who have regular jobs and are trying to support their families don't really have time to sit on school boards. Now, professional college kids, like a lot of teachers who just spend their times at universities living off grants, they've got plenty of time to run for office and become, when they're not working at Starbucks, to become the next school board elected official. And that is the argument, and that is the complaint that I'm getting with a lot of people. Good seeing you, Mannequin. Good seeing you, Life Under the Microscope. Good seeing you, Aaron H. Yes, that's right. I do a lot of personal injury law, but my background is civil rights and appellate law. So equal protection and things like that are definitely high on my list. I believe that as soon as you discriminate against one group, you're inviting that other group to be oppressed. And so it's not the government's job to pick winners and losers. It's your job to be courteous, considerate, and kind to others and definitely not have some woke Marxist public school teacher destroying the minds of your children. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree. So let's go into the next video as we wait for my friend Brett to show up. Let's check it out. Let's make sure we got sound. Let's make sure you guys can see it. And here we go. Holdeth oneth, and boom.
My name is Teacher Roby. I am non-binary. I use they, them pronouns.
That's bullshit. That's bullshit.
For example, they are a great art teacher. They taught us how to draw stitch.
That was very confusing.
Many of you already know that about me. Pronouns are super important for myself. For you, it's important that we get it right every single time.
No.
If you ever make a mistake, I'll just politely correct you. And you should also be making sure that you use those correct pronouns.
I'll get right on it.
If you have questions about that, we can talk about it offline, all right?
Well, thanks for wasting my time.
My name is Teacher Roby. I am non-binary. I use they, them pronouns.
So it's basically, these are people, many say they're suffering from mental illness and they're attention seekers, and they want to force their political ideology on your children. And so that's why I'm doing the show tonight, because the pushback that you get from people who are against homeschooling is that their kids won't be socialized, right? Well, we're going to talk about different ways to socialize your kids once Brett comes on. But in the meantime, I'll teach you a little bit of the history of what's going on with these so-called educators. I mean, America has one of the lowest educational standards, but yet the teachers keep getting pay raises. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are not on their agenda. Their agenda is the political re-education of the brains of your child. And if you don't pull your kids out of public schools, you are going to have problems with your kids being like these Antifa guys, right? Running around, dressing like girls if they're boys, you know, hating the man, hating the system. It's pretty scary stuff, say many. Let's see here. Good seeing you, James Forbes. Absolutely. Good seeing you, my brother. Let's get into the next video. Here we go.
Just listen to this.
Before my 2-minute starts, I want to give any parent with a child in the chamber to remove them if they would choose to do so. Alrighty, this book is Gay by Juno Dawson was found in a 7th grade classroom at Collinswood Middle School. It was also on the ELA recommended reading list for 7th graders at J.M. Robinson. I'm going to read from chapter 9, the ins and outs of gay sex, starting at page 201, part 1, boy on boy sex. Perhaps the most important skill you will master as a gay or bi man is a timeless classic, the hand. Good news is you can practice it on yourself. The bad news is each guy has become very used to his own way of getting himself. Learning how to find a partner's personal style can take ages, but it can be very rewarding when you do. A good hand is all about the wrist action. Rub the head of his back and forth with your hand. Try different speeds and pressures until he responds positively. A bad hand is grasping a and shaking it like a ketchup bottle. It's no wonder that 92% of CMS graduating seniors aren't college or career ready when you're instructing them on how to give blow and instead of teaching them how to add and subtract. Superintendent, you stated this book was, quote, brought into the classroom by a teacher with no intent to allow students access. Any teacher that puts material like this on his or her bookshelf is either a bad teacher or a pedophile who grooms children.
2 minutes are up. 2 minutes are up. Thank you.
We will vote you out November 8th. You are not leader.
I'm not on the ballot November 8th, but.
All right, let me know what you think about this in the comment section. Like I said in the previous video I posted regarding this topic, this is not a game, bro. They are coming for the kids.
That's right.
Those teachers, like the one responsible for this book, they are not trying to teach your kids anything else but depravity. They are not interested in teaching math, science, social study. No. They are trying to normalize PORN. So God bless this mother. She is doing the Lord's work. If you want to.
Now, really quickly, this is the theory that several of my friends who do education law have. The theory is that with Epstein Island and all those tapes that the FBI hid from the American public, it's highly likely that high government officials were engaged in dehumanizing little kids. And a lot of these guys like to dress like women. They have a fetish. A lot of people believe that Adam Schiff is a transgender cross-dresser, et cetera, and that what they're trying to do is transform the minds of children into thinking that this is acceptable behavior. So when the Epstein tapes and that evidence finally does come out, it will be normalized, and these will be the people that are on the jury. And so that is a theory, and it does kind of make sense. As soon as Sleepy Joe got into power, he put that dude, Rachel Levine, he looks like Frankenstein's monster, dude that wore dresses, in charge of the mental health of children, who advocated for the, mutilation of children's body parts and injecting little kids with hormones, injecting girls with anabolic steroids, which squares out their jaw, which enlarges their female part, deepens their voice, and sterilizes them. And we know that the same people who support the sterilization of children and population control, such as people like Bill Gates, also support this woke agenda. And so many people believe that it's all part of the same group. And many parents who've called me say it's a Luciferian woke religion. And Moloch, as you know, wants you to sacrifice your children to him. And so that, or they, them, right? Whatever it is. But confusing children is the basis of the Luciferian movement. And so it all kind of makes sense when you think about it. Give me a bunch of ones if you think so. Give me a bunch of twos if you think I'm crazy, because I'm just repeating things that I've heard from other people. I haven't done the research. I don't really understand it. I've never understood why a guy would want to wear a dress in public. I definitely would not want them around my kids or sharing a restroom with them. That's just not me as a parent. That's something that my child can decide once they've received their education and they're old enough to not be as impressionable. And nobody loves your children more than you. So why would you let somebody like that around your kids or try to influence them when they may have their own personal or political interests in mind and not the best interests of the child? Is that a fair argument? So let's get into the next video. All right, so we're going to learn a little bit about Brett Pike now in his classical learner. Free speech, social media, censorship, and the First Amendment, because that is one of the prongs of the woke movement, which is to silence their opposition. We saw that the FBI and the CIA worked closely under Obama and Biden to censor people's Twitter accounts and social media accounts to create the false appearance of a consensus that people support this woke ideology. And anybody who spoke out against it, including the jabs, was silenced. So it would appear as though there is a majority, and that is very typical of fascist regimes like the communist Chinese. Let's go.
Free speech, social media censorship, and the First Amendment. Classical Learners, Cubs to Bears, by Brett Pike, illustrated by Masha Noir. Charisma Cat had a wicked idea. Take the fawns from all the deer. I will have complete control of how the cubs and puppies grow. Little ones of either gender at the Saving Puppy Center. Cows, cats, dogs, whole flocks. We will let coyotes adopt. We can't leave these babies alone. Babies deserve a loving home. Coyotes love a tasty meal. Turn baby calves into veal. Stand Up Bear had a big personality, so he tried his luck with late-night comedy. Telling jokes was his craft. He made lions and hyenas laugh. Animals would watch with glee to hear the truths that he would speak. Bunnies, puppies, things that moo, coyotes turn them into stew. How could animals be such dupes? Coyotes just want piglet soups. Stand Up Bear got many laughs for his defense of a little calf. The next day, the local roosters reported, Stand Up Bear is a loser. We must silence this loudmouth yuppie. He is against saving puppies. All who challenge the Saving Puppy Center must have their thought crimes censored. Tell the bear he must leave. He can't do stand-up comedy. Stand Up Bear was not deterred. He called the local mountain bluebirds. Carry my message as far as you reach. Carry my message with tweets. The bluebirds flew all over the farm, tweet by tweet to sound the alarm. Don't trust the roosters, they think they are slick. Roosters are animals of deception and tricks. The roosters reported, the bear's anti-bird. We can't let him speak such dangerous words. He talks about turning calves into veal. How does that make the farm animals feel? The time has come to limit his reach. No longer can he send such insensitive tweets. Stand Up Bear refused to back down. He would spread his message all over town. He wrote his jokes for all that would look, put his face on the front of a book. Who lies around all day and is really fat? None other than Charisma Cat. The bear's message was taking a toll, so the cat called on the garden trolls. The trolls proclaimed, "The bear is bad." To alert the farm, they put up red flags. Foolish animals just didn't learn. They cheered as the bear's Facebooks burned. Stand-Up Bear had another move. He took his jokes to me and YouTube. "Hey guys, did you hear about the rat? Oh wait, that is Charisma Cat, who lives with their mom but wants to sacrifice foals." Just your average garden trolls. The School of Fish was instructed to teach that Stand-Up Bear was spewing hate speech. No more talk of stew and soup. Coyotes are a protected group. The bear will pay for the words he has used. He is now banned from me and YouTube. Control their speech, control their minds. Golden power will be mine, all mine! Many animals ignored what was true, and instead decided to signal virtue. The bears didn't listen as the other animals did. The goats would sacrifice all of their kids. Cows, alpaca, and roly-polies handed their children to hungry coyotes. Stand-Up Bear continued to crush and told his jokes at breakfast and lunch. Nothing can stop him from speaking the truth, and his message is now reaching the youth. Speak truths that others would not dare, and you too will be a stand-up bear.
All right. Well, hopefully you guys like that. I want to introduce you guys to Brett Pike. That's one of his videos. How you doing, Brett?
How's it going?
Pretty
Came at
good.
the right
Pretty good.
time.
Yeah, looks like you popped in just at the right time. Today, I showed some videos of what's going on at these public schools, where the teachers, the blue-haired mafia, are trying to secretly, mutate your children into, like transgenders, or giving them pornographic material, telling them that white people are the devil and they're oppressors and all that. And I was, thinking, the big pushback that I keep getting, Brett, from a lot of parents who want to homeschool their kids is they're worried about them being properly socialized. And so I was just showing them, why would you want, like not Martin Luther King, but Malcolm X said, why would you want to let your enemy teach your children? And why would you want your child to be socialized in an environment like that? And you're the expert, you're the educator. So I wanted to introduce you again, as some of the people don't know you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about what you do.
Yeah, I am Brett Pike. I am the founder of the Classical Learner Homeschooling Company. And I remember when I was doing my student teaching, and I was 22 years old, and I'm in a classroom with a global history, with a group full of African American students. And I have all these eyes looking at me. It's my first day there. It's my first day doing this. And I went in front of the class and I pulled up a map and I said, all right, who could show me Africa on the map? And at first I just thought, oh, they're not interested. And then I quickly realized that it wasn't that they weren't interested. It was that not one single child in the class was able to identify Africa on a map. And these were Black children in Queens, New York. And right then it dawned on me, because you come through school and you think what to expect. I said, wow, something's really wrong with this education system. And before I was even done with my student teaching, I knew that I would never send my kids to the public school system. And I saw some horrible things. You want to talk about socialization, right? I mean, we had a teacher meeting that I get called into because our students, some of whom who were my students, were caught in the locker room filming pornography. And this was like the norm. The fights, the stuff that went on was absolutely remarkable. And I knew then that I didn't have kids yet, but I would never send them to the public school system. And a few years later, I just completely break free from it altogether. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start a homeschool company because I think it could be done better than it is in the public school. And we've done that, and we have thousands of families now. And in terms of socializing your kids, it's easier than it's ever been before. There are literally 3.7 million people homeschooling in America. If you just go onto Facebook, you could find groups of people in your area. Just type in your county, your town, homeschool group. These groups all over the country. They just make groups on Facebook. That's how they find people. And then you meet up with people in your area. People set up co-ops. My kids go to a co-op every Tuesday and Thursday with 50 other kids. They're in jujitsu. They're in baseball. It's really not as difficult as you would think to homeschool your kids. Not to mention, they're out in the world with you, and they're at restaurants, and they're running errands, and they're doing things for work. And socialization really isn't hard. And kind of getting back to that story at the beginning, like public school socialization is what I'd be worried about. I mean, you want to talk about socialization. They told the kids that if they roughhouse with each other, that an invisible disease would get them. They would take it home to grandma, and grandma would die, right? You can't roughhouse, you can't hug, you can't slap hands, right? You can't give high fives. And this was the norm, right? That wearing a mask was a norm, and keeping away from people and being afraid of people is the norm. And that's what socialization is in the public school system, which is why you see all of these shootings happen at the public school system, right? No one ever talks about that, right? That aspect of it, that why is the place that always gets shot up a school? It's because it's disastrous. It's disastrous in terms of socialization. And, we could talk about the psychological effects of that and school shooter drills and everything. But if you're worried about that, I get it. But as someone who's done it, as someone who interacts with thousands of homeschooled students, it is night and day how much more impressive they are compared to a student from public school, who usually those public school kids, they're not even able to hold a conversation with an adult. When you talk to these homeschool kids, they not only could hold a conversation, they lead the conversation, and it's interesting. They're talking about interesting things. They're taking it in interesting directions. So to me, it's night and day. And if I was worried about, if I was sending my kid to public school, then I'd be worried about socialization. But I certainly wouldn't be worried about that with homeschool. And if it's a priority to you, they're going to socialize, right? Like, sure, you could be the homeschool parent that keeps them in their house and they never interact with anyone. But that's the rarity. In fact, homeschool parents usually, because they say the socialization thing so much, they kind of wear it as a badge of honor. Like, I'll show you what socialization is. And they have their kid out in the world doing everything. So it's really not, what society would lead you to believe.
Well, Brett, I can just say from my own personal experience with respect to socialization that I take my son to judo and Muay Thai, and he gets socialized by warriors, people with the warrior mindset, the samurai code. He teaches a sense of duty. He's being taught a sense of duty and honor, respect for his elders, which you don't get taught in a lot of these schools, right? I mean, isn't that a fair statement?
Yeah, you don't. And I love that you have them doing that. I have my kids in jujitsu as well, and it's a great culture and thing to get them around. And everyone sees the videos online, the way these students talk to their teachers and whatnot. They actually physically assault their teachers. And the truth is, the students in the school are probably as much of, if not more of, I don't know if threat's the right word, but a negative influence on your kids. Where when you have your children around peers who are in homes with domestic violence and who are watching pornography and are exposed to a lot of these bad things, right? And all of these ideologies, the gender ideology, right? Their peers buy into this. And then when all of their friends around them are thinking that way, it has a really damaging psychological impact on your kids. So public school socialization is a disaster in every way. And I'm sure there are some public schools in America in the right towns where it's not as bad. But for the majority of these schools, the peers that your kids will be with are just as damaging as the teachers and the curriculum itself. And one of the best things about homeschool is your kids wind up hanging out with a bunch of other homeschooled kids, and the culture that these kids grow up in is a lot better. Their kids Their parents don't have them on YouTube all the time because they take a lot of agency over the lives of their kids. They don't have them watching all of the crap. They usually come from nice Christian homes, so they have a moral foundation. And not that all people that homeschool are Christian. There's secular people that homeschool, all walks of life. But either way, there is an idea of a moral or ethical foundation that's coming from these families. And then that's kind of the culture that your kid gets to hang out with versus, whatever you're getting in the public school system. So, spin the wheel and hope you get lucky.
So Brett, one of the things that I wanted to share with the audience, unfortunately, it's not your video, but it is a short, it's about 9 minutes. And I want to share this with my audience before we continue. It's about how the Rockefellers imported the Prussian education system into this country, which is something that you're a big teacher of. And one of the foundations of the Classical Learner program is to teach parents why the education system is the way that it is. And so I'm just really quickly going to share this with the audience. And I think that this is really going to give us a much better understanding of why things are the way they are. Because I think this is really important. It's a good segue in now that you've introduced yourself for my audience to get a better understanding.
We are going to be discussing the various historical rationales for public schools, particularly here in the United States. Now, first of all, this might seem very obvious, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Schooling and education are two slightly different things. Everybody gets an education, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what point in time you've ever lived, you are educated, whether it's an education that you receive in the ivory towers of Cambridge or an education you receive on the mean streets of Mumbai. Schools provide a particular kind of education. In particular, the formal education system that has developed in the United States that we're going to be thinking about when we're thinking about the rationales for education. These are our various rationales we'll be discussing during this module. Civic virtue, meritocracy, social mobility, social stability, economic efficiency, but maybe the grandest and the one that gins us up and gets us most excited and has the most inspiring implications is freedom. Freedom and liberty, this idea very much attached to the Enlightenment that many of our founding fathers had, that we needed a universal education system to flush out all of our old superstitions and replace them with scientific rationality and enlightenment. The idea that literacy could help provide that was very crucial. Do we really need schools to teach us to read? I see your question over there. What do we have? Look, today you can learn just about anything you want with a few hours on YouTube. It's a fair point. And to amplify it, during the American Revolution, about 85% of white males in New England were literate, compared to only about 60% in Old England. So no, one doesn't need schools in order to teach us to read. There were other reasons that many of our founding fathers stressed when they discussed universal education. One of them, civic virtue. Benjamin Rush, who was a doctor who lived in Pennsylvania, stressed this idea of civic virtue when he proposed a universal education system there. I'll give you a little bit of a flavor of Benjamin Rush's proposal. Let our pupil be taught that he does not belong to himself, but that he is public property. Let him be taught to love his family, but let him be taught at the same time that he must forsake and even forget them when the welfare of his country requires it. The idea of civic virtue is that good citizens are not just born, they have to be created, and schools are one of the principal ways that we can make that happen. This was an idea that Thomas Jefferson also shared, that we needed to instill these ideas of these basic skills of public debate, discourse, reason, in order to establish a good democracy. But Jefferson's vision was also freighted with what he thought of as the sort of natural aristocracy. Schools could be used to help us identify those people who possessed the talent and the skills, people not unlike Alexander Hamilton, in fact, who did not come to those by birth or by wealth, but instead because this was something that they naturally possessed. And schools could be a way that we could allow that cream.
By the way, Brett, did you notice how they put that that scarf on her? it almost looks like a hangman's noose, doesn't it?
It sure does. Yep.
So, look, I don't want to bore these guys too much. What I'm going to do is just really quickly get you guys into the video, the meat of what I'm trying to share. So let's get into the one that matters now. Here we go.
What's the point of education? I mean, really, what's the point? To learn to read, write, and arithmetic, but for what purpose? Beyond all the lofty ideals of education, the brick walls and fountains and gardens of Ivy League schools, the purpose of education is to create workers. How many times have you heard someone say what their major is and the response is, "What do you plan to do with that?" We are educated so we can get a job. In the early years of Canadian and American education, things were very different. Not better, certainly. School was only for wealthy children who didn't need to work, but its focus was on creating great thinkers, innovators, inventors. That all changed, as so many other things did, with industry. And if you believe the stories, it can all be traced back to one man, John D. Rockefeller, the richest person to ever live in the modern era. So much has been written about how Rockefeller maliciously targeted lower-income children and morphed the school system to create a mindless army of worker drones who were prepared only to serve his companies and maximize his fortune. I disagree. There's a philosophical phrase called Hanlon's razor. It states, "Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity." Rockefeller and his influence on education is a perfect example. The position of power that Rockefeller found himself in over education was a byproduct of his massive fortune and of capitalism, which places into position of power and influence powerful people who often know nothing about the field they are influencing. In this video, we explore Rockefeller's approach to education, fueled, I believe, by a legitimate desire to help, and how his best intentions and complete lack of expertise had dramatic and far-reaching consequences that affect the way you learn to this day. John D. Rockefeller Sr. was an industrialist, arguably the most successful industrialist in U.S. history. At one point, Rockefeller owned about 90% of oil refining in the United States, and at the height of his wealth, he was worth 1.5% of the nation's GDP. For reference, Elon Musk is only worth about 0.7% of the US's GDP. Rockefeller's legacy is complicated. On the one hand, he created one of the most powerful monopolies in the history of the United States, doing so arguably by ruthless means. On the other, himself, his wife Laura Spelman Rockefeller, and some of their contemporaries more or less invented modern philanthropy, giving away billions of dollars to various causes. If there was one thing that defined the way Rockefeller did business and charity, it was efficiency. Part of his meteoric success was that Rockefeller simply ran his businesses more efficiently than his competitors. He would drive them out of business, buy up their assets, reorganize them to run more efficiently, and then profit in ways that his competitors had not. Near the end of the 1800s, Rockefeller turned his eye for efficiency towards the school systems. At the time, school was primarily for wealthier children. There weren't many practical skills. Kids were trained for academia or the sciences. The United States had seen an influx of immigrants, and most poor and immigrant children had to work from an early age to help support their families. In the South in particular, slavery had only been abolished about 15 years earlier. The South was still struggling to replace enslaved peoples with new farm laborers, and the Black community faced a significant lack of education. Rockefeller set out to change this, putting his philanthropic efforts towards education in the South. He envisioned a very different idea of schooling. He thought school should be full of vocational training, practical tools to teach children how to succeed as farm or industrial workers. In 1902, Rockefeller put up $1 million, over $33 million today, to establish the General Education Board, or GEB, an organization that would provide support to educational institutions in the South, as well as medical and higher education institutions across the United States. At the time, it was the largest philanthropic donation in U.S. history. By this time,
Now, Brett, you can tell that this guy is sort of giving a sort of a neutral viewpoint of what Rockefeller was doing when he brought the education system into this country. But I wanted you to sort of take over because there's a lot of things that I think that he's missing. So Brett, when I first met you, what I learned from watching your Cubs to Bears videos is that Rockefeller imported the Prussian model, and it was based upon a model of basically creating good, loyal soldiers to the state. Can you sort of tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I can elaborate on that. And yeah, I found the guy's perspective interesting. And there's a lot of truth in what he said, where like people, even when they talk about Rockefeller, they often quote him where he says competition is a sin. But if you read his autobiography, he actually talks about that. And he just basically believed there's a group of people that are smarter than normal people like you and me. And he kind of believed in an aristocracy. And he said, why would we set up all these philanthropic organizations and we have two different organizations in the field of education, right? Or whatever field it might be, or the field of medicine, where they're competing with each other. That's a sin. Why don't we just pool all those resources together and let the smartest guy run it? And that was kind of where that competition is a sin comes from. It's elitism in his mind. And in terms of where he got the idea for our modern education system, yeah, that actually goes back to the Napoleonic Wars in the early 1800s. And at the time, France was fighting with Prussia, and Napoleon just wiped the floor with them. And it got so bad that the Prussian soldiers turned around and they disobeyed orders and ran away. And after that, the power structure in Prussia said, how do we prevent this from ever happening again? And they brought in their top social engineers of the day. And they came back to him and said, look, if you want this not to happen again, we can do it through the education system. It's the best way to do it. He loved it. And they came up with an education system, 5 days a week, 45-minute blocks, bells, standardized curriculum, mandated state teacher training. And it's the same education system that you see all over the world today. And in the early 1900s, Rockefeller started the General Education Board. He found out about that model, and he basically leveraged $10,000 grants, which, like, I mean, you could put up a building at that time. Hold on 1 second. Wesley, put that down. Eli, come here. Out of this room. Let's go. Come on. Out of the room. Sorry, I got my dog ripping up bags. He's a puppy. So, yeah, he uses the General Education Board and leverages $10,000 grants. And if you want to read about that, you can read the book Propaganda by Edward Bernays, who worked for him, and he actually talks about how they did it. But $10,000 at that time, you could put up a school. And the only catch was, listen, if you want this grant, you have to implement the Rockefeller curriculum. But of course, they sold it as you're not only getting these $10,000, you're getting a scientifically tested, state-of-the-art curriculum. So people didn't know better, and they thought, wow, how great is this? Look what Rockefeller's doing. And town after town took that $10,000 grant. Schools went up. They implemented the curriculum. Before you knew it, the majority of the country was. And then Rockefeller took that model and they started spreading it all throughout the world. And then once it becomes normalized, then they go through the process of, okay, now we're going to make it compulsory. So that's kind of how they did it. And the idea behind it was to create a population that's obedient to authority. Like was the function of the Prussian model. That's what the Prussian power structure wanted when they put the education system together. So it was designed for obedience. It produces obedience. And Rockefeller saw that, and he basically brought it to the Western world. And it started here in America, and it spread like wildfire all over the world. And now governments everywhere use it to control the minds of the population. And, you know, the sad thing is that maybe at first it was done with some good intentions, because you don't want a population of people that, you know, have that soldiers that run, right? That's not a good thing. But ultimately what it became is just a system of complete indoctrination and enslavement. And, you know, we can do a lot better, and we're doing a lot better in the private sector. So
I agree with you. And I was really impressed by your video. It's just, it's in vertical mode. So it's so tiny, it's really hard for me to play. But in essence, it appears, and now I do have a comment. John B says that Rockefeller was a Freemason, and that's where he got his beliefs and ideas. And the Reichel curriculum was the racist MK Ultra Grand Wizard Hood's curriculum. I don't know anything. Do you know anything about that, or is that beyond the scope of our?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the Rochelle curriculum.
Okay. It's just interesting. He calls it the Rockefeller curriculum. Okay, strike that. Not Rochelle, Rockefeller. It looks like it was a typo. So basically, he's saying that the Rockefeller curriculum is like a racist curriculum. And look, when I see critical race theory, that's what I think of. I mean, all critical race theory is anti-white racism, right? I mean, isn't that in essence what it is?
Yeah, well, you have the Rockefeller curriculum that was implemented in the early 1900s, and then you have what it became, right? And really, that's just the system. And that, John D. Rockefeller and his son, right, they're dead. And the system was left in place. And over the years that followed, you saw pretty much everyone try to infiltrate that system. So there were congressional hearings in the 1950s, the Congressional Reese Committee. And the objective of the committee was to examine the activities of tax-exempt foundations, specifically to determine if these tax-exempt foundations, Rockefeller, Carnegie, had been involved in what they called un-American activities. And they had to define un-American activities, and they defined that as any activities designed to change or alter the laws of America through unconstitutional means not intended in the original Constitution. And there was this guy, Norman Dodd. He's an amazing congressman, lived an amazing life. You can watch Norman Dodd's interview with G. Edward Griffin before he died, and it will blow your mind. But Norman Dodd leads this investigation, and he gets access to the internal corporate minutes of these big foundations, Rockefeller and whatnot. And what they found was, one, he found interesting that the foundations got together and they were scheming how to get America into World War I. So they wanted World War I, the Rockefellers, Carnegie, these foundations. And after the war, they got together and they had a meeting about how they could make sure that America never had an anti-war mindset, never went back to an anti-war mindset. Because you have to remember, George Washington, when America was founded, America was an isolationist country. And that actually carried through the Monroe Doctrine, right? Even in the Monroe Doctrine, they missed the second part of that. The first part of the Monroe Doctrine is that President Monroe, who is one of the greatest Americans of all time, and we could talk about him, but President Monroe told Europe that this hemisphere is under the protection of the United States of America. It belongs to us, and Europe has no business being here. But the second part of the Monroe Doctrine was that an America staying true to the ideals of George Washington will not meddle in European affairs, is actually the second part of the Monroe Doctrine. So America was an isolationist country, and it's what allowed us, through our natural geographical protection, right, allowed America to really become this thriving economic center of the world. And that was true up until World War I. In fact, Woodrow Wilson, when he ran for president of the United States, he ran as he was running for re-election. He was the president that kept us out of war. He ran on that we would not go to war, and he won the vote. The people love that. Woodrow Wilson, we could talk about him too. So then World War I kicks off, and by the way, we could talk about how they got everyone interested in that, wanted to be in that war. So World War I kicks off. After the war, they say, all right, how do we make sure that America is not an isolationist country anymore? Because the anti-war mindset is still deep in the American culture. And they figured out that the best way to do that was through the education system, and specifically through a rewiring of the American understanding of history. So what they did was they approached the 4 leading historians of the day, and they basically asked them to do this, offered them money, and they were turned away. People had integrity. They said, screw it, back to the drawing board. They handpicked 20 college students from throughout the United States of America. They gave $400,000 in college grants, which was a lot of money at the time. They flew them out to London. They had a meeting. Well, you fast forward 10, 15 years, and those 20 hand-selected college students made up the governing board of the American Historical Association. Well, the American Historical Association at that time was in charge of best practices for getting into college, right? For getting into college, best practices for high school, the teaching of high school, the training of high school teachers, and high school curriculum, right? So they used the American Historical Association. They hijacked that authority to fundamentally alter Americans' understanding of history. Now, you have to keep in mind, people say, oh, well, or is that what, now schools teach war is bad, allegedly, or whatever it might be, right? Well, it's not the original mission that matters. It's how they hijacked the system, because the system was hijacked, right? And now they can use the education system to alter Americans' understanding of history in any way they see fit. And that's where like the CRT and stuff like that comes in, right? The critical race theory, where they're now training America's students to view America through the Marxist lens of oppressed versus oppressors. And they're teaching that the American founding fathers and all of these people were bad, and they were bad because they had slaves, right? Because of slavery, but they're not teaching the context. They're not teaching the context that slavery was an accepted and normalized institution throughout all of human history, everywhere in the world. This had gone on for thousands of years. People didn't think, oh, this is bad. People thought this is normal. It's just a way of life. And around the time of the American Revolution, you start to have this revolution in ideas. And that's where all of these concepts, these ideas of liberty, rights of the individual, these were foreign things. This didn't really exist in the world. And as those ideas start to evolve, people start to say, yeah, but shouldn't they apply to all people, right? But you got to realize things like this, these radical transformation of human psychology takes time. And what ultimately would become the end of slavery was driven by the ideals of the American Revolution. And these people that they're teaching our young people, they're teaching our kids are bad, are actually some of the greatest champions of liberty in the history of humanity, And the truth about slavery in the West is that England and the United States of America are the reason there's not slavery all over the world today, are the drivers to the end of slavery. But without that context and just teaching, oh no, look, the founders were bad, right? They are fundamentally altering Americans' understanding of history. And then you talk about why that is. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but the objective is to separate the American nation. And you have to understand, a nation is a people, right? You have the Iroquois nation. You have the Jewish nation, right? No matter where the Jews are in the world, they're Jews. No matter where the Iroquois are, they're Iroquois, right? Well, you have the American nation, which is bigger than the land or the country. It's the mindset. It's the common culture that unites the people. The objective is to sever the nation's connection to its roots. And you start doing that with the children. And the reason you want to do that is if you sever the American nation's connection to its roots, you sever the nation's will to protect itself, to defend itself, for self-determination. You sever its emotional and intellectual connection to the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the United States Constitution. And this is the biggest fight happening in America right now. If this is not corrected, if we continue to allow them to sever our nation's connection to our roots, then there is no winning the future. And this notion that you can raise generations of children and not teach them about the greatness of your nation and your country and expect that country to persist and continue to be great and go on is nonsense. It is imperative that you teach our children about the greatness of George Washington. It is imperative that you teach them. What a remarkable idea in a world full of monarchs, that when George Washington was basically given absolute power, where he was unanimously elected president of the United States, where he had the absolute support and loyalty of the entire military, that he willfully stepped out of power. And then John Adams steps into power, and he is popular himself, but ultimately he then loses to Thomas Jefferson. And this is the key point. You have a peaceful transition of power from one political entity and party to an opposition party. And it started this precedent, and it started this absolute wave of liberty, not just in the United States of America, but all over the world. And if you went back to 1776, I think there were maybe 5 to 7 republics in the entire world. And these were in small little remote places. These were not big countries. And there were, I think there was one constitution, or like 1 to 3 constitutions and bills of rights in the entire world. And the rest of the world was monarchies, and in most cases, hereditary monarchies. And the ideals of the American Revolution lit the fire of liberty throughout the world. And it brought us the world that we have today, where everyone sees all of these republics. And now they try to manipulate that, and they say, oh no, it's democracies, right? They try to manipulate everything else. So restoring that connection and protecting the connection of the American nation to our roots is of the most imperative objectives. And it's something that we all have to realize is important. And I know it's easy to get caught up in that. Like someone talked about the Masons earlier. Oh, those founding fathers, they're bad. They're Masons. Well, if the Masons are trying to subvert us today, the way they would subvert us is by figuring out how to sever your connection to those people. Even if that meant saying, oh, look at them. They were Masons. They were bad. You will know them by their fruit. This is straight from the Bible. You know a man by his children. You know the founders of a nation by what they produced. And what they produced were some of the greatest political documents in the history of humanity. And don't fall into the truther trap of, oh, well, you know, those were Masons where they were bad. No, their fruit is what I care about. And what they produced is absolutely worth fighting for. And Michael Eline, as a veteran, I think will tell you it's absolutely worth dying for. And that's ultimately what we all have to recognize. Wesley, I'm going to keep it.
And even your dog, even Brett's dog agrees. See, he's getting some woof woofs. He's raising the roof right now. His dog's loving it. And I'll just add, while Brett's away, that
just going to get him a bone.
It's fine. That our original founding document, the Unanimous Declaration, it literally is directly from John Locke. Okay, that all of our rights are unalienable and that they come from our Creator. And the C was spelled in uppercase, which denotes deity, which means that our founding fathers believed that our rights came from an all-powerful deity, a Creator, and that we were born with these unalienable rights. And ultimately, it led to unimaginable prosperity and peace. And many people don't even know that America didn't have an income tax system, but yet we had one of the most powerful economies in the world. And that once the bankers took control of our economy, that was the beginning of the end of America being an all-powerful country. And we had a gold-based currency. We had a currency that was backed by something of intrinsic value. And the bankers did not like that. And they were able to basically purchase control of this government. The Federal Reserve banking system is a private corporation. It's no more federal than the Federal Express. And so, look, I'm not as educated as Brett Pike, but I'll tell you that all of these things work in tandem like a spider web. And that we have the ability to reclaim the republic. We have the ability to reclaim the republic by educating our kids, by homeschooling our children. A good friend of mine, Robert, was a special needs teacher at one time, and he ended up homeschooling his kids much in the same way as Brett Pike, and he's also an inactive Marine. And so one of the cool things that I can tell you about Marines is that we really believe in patriotism and love of country. And we recognize that you cannot have a republic unless you're unified as a people. And if you don't have your children learning about the values of hard work and honesty and dignity, keeping your word, a firm handshake, protecting your women, learning how to manipulate a firearm, learning how to protect yourself from all enemies, foreign and domestic, you'll end up having one of these blue-haired mafiosos over at a public school, basically claiming the mind of your child. And so that's why it was important for me to bring Brett Pike on tonight. So, and now Rhinelab says that there's no more parrot hair teachers. I think you're right. And now John B says, or re-educated, if you will. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you send a well-meaning child into the public university system, and they come out wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt, hating America, waving a rainbow flag or a trans flag, men trying to play women's sports. It's unbelievable to me what's happened. And in record time, when Sleepy Joe got into power, and somebody was using, I guess, his auto pen, those executive orders got written into law, written into the legal system, and a lot of far left judges. And now look at what we're left with, guys. Very dangerous if you don't have control over the minds of your children. Good seeing you, Diego Verduzco. Now, ex-bootlicker says that DEI was invented to make you fight with your neighbors. Oh, I agree with that. And he says it was invented by BlackRock. Now, something that I find interesting about that comment is that both of the people who tried to assassinate our president, both apparently had strong connections with BlackRock. I think one of them was actually in a BlackRock commercial. And so it's very interesting. BlackRock is the company that tried to force this DEI, that didn't earn it, diversity, equity, and inclusion, on these businesses. And they had like the special score that you couldn't get credit and things like that unless you proved you had a certain amount of woke females, a certain amount of blacks, a certain amount of this race, certain amount of that race, but they couldn't be white, of course. So it was based upon replacing the so-called white man with people of other races, but it ultimately is based upon putting people who are less qualified at the front of the line to make up for the social injustice of so-called systemic racism. It's just another form of racism, and it's very similar to what the Germans instituted in the Hitler Youth in the German schools of the 1930s and 40s. What about that, Brett? Do you have anything to say? Do you see the parallels with the modern public education system with this DEI and critical race theory and what the Hitler Youth were doing in the German school system in the 20s and 30s?
Well, I will say about that school system, at least they were teaching their children to love their nation.
Yeah, that's true.
And, they were teaching them that they were good and, that their history was good and they should be proud of it. And that's, that might be a controversial take, but that's a hell of a lot better than what's happening here in America. And that is not an endorsement of Hitler for all the manipulators out there.
Right.
But the truth is, that's how bad the American education system has gotten, that if you compared the two, I mean, if I could have one system that teaches my children that we have a beautiful history and that we should honor our ancestors and that be proud of our nation and that you should work hard and strive to be great for your nation and for your countrymen, versus the other one, which is teaching our children that our nation is rotten to its core, that our ancestors were bad people, that we have certain groups of people who are the victims and certain groups who are the oppressors. That's a nightmare. So that's how bad the education system is, that if you compared the two, that one's better. And I know that there's manipulators who will clip that and be like, oh my God, can you believe this? He's endorsing Nazi Germany. No, I'm not endorsing Nazi Germany. I'm just pointing out that what was happening there is actually better than what's happening right now in the American public schools. And that's, so it's a low bar. We can do a much higher bar, which teaches about individual liberty and respecting your fellow man and rights endowed by God. And at the same time, teaching the beauty of the American history, because we have, I think of all countries of the world, possibly the most beautiful. And really interesting. We talked a little about President Monroe. Well, President Monroe was actually good friends with General Lafayette in France. And after the American Revolution, Lafayette had gone to France and he was fighting in the French Revolution. And his wife wound up getting imprisoned. And James Monroe had served directly under George Washington in the Revolutionary War. He knew Lafayette. They fought together. And he was a diplomat at the time, working in France. And he used his political sway, and he was able to get Lafayette's wife out of prison. And they were great friends their entire life. In fact, Lafayette traveled across the world and came to America. And he came to visit Monroe before he died. And it's actually a really interesting meeting because you had the last founding father to serve as president of the United States versus the last living general from the American Revolutionary War. And these two titans of our history meeting together. And Lafayette was talking to Monroe, and he talks about the American Revolution and the French Revolution and why the French Revolution failed. And he says that in France, all they had ever known is authoritarianism. All they had ever known is monarchy. So they fought the revolution, but the people didn't have the political understanding of what liberty really was. And in America, it was completely different. In America, these were people out on the wilderness, out on the frontier, who valued individual liberty and sovereignty, and they understood what it was. So after the revolution, the power vacuum wasn't about authoritarianism, it was about liberty. And Lafayette thought that made America the greatest country in the history of the world. And that was this historical titan, this legend, right? This myth of a man, right? That was his take on why the French Revolution went in the way of authoritarianism, and the American Revolution produced something in which the world had never seen before. And
but you hit on something, Brett, that city dwellers tend to engage in groupthink. And we know that the Marxist left wants everyone to live in these 15-minute cities, right? Isn't there a parallel with that?
yeah, well, they certainly do. They want everyone in the cities. They want everyone eating the poison food and taking the poison shots and watching the dumbed down screens. And, when they go to school, the only thing they're really being taught, everyone thinks that school is a failure. But the truth is, school is very good at doing what it's designed to do. Remember, we talked about that Prussian system, right? Making people obedient. The number one lesson taught in public school, this is systematic, and it's outside of the teachers. A lot of good teachers out there who try, but they're in that system. The number one lesson taught in public school is that truth comes from authority. And so now they're getting dumbed down. They're getting the shots. They're getting the vaccines. Their food is poison, right? And they're watching the YouTube stuff, and the chemtrails are being dropped on them, and they're being dumbed down left and right. And the only thing they're being taught in school is that truth comes from authority. And that's how you get 2020 to happen. And you watch as the government tries to take away all of our God-given liberties, and people just in lockstep defend what the authoritarians are doing. That's where it comes from. That's the school system is what that results in.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And a segue into that, Brett, I don't know if you noticed, I think it's the mayor of either New York or Chicago. They're going to take down the statue of Christopher Columbus. And I see a systematic movement by the left to destroy the statues of our founding fathers. But once you destroy the Jefferson Monument, for example, isn't the next step then to say, well, they were evil, and therefore the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is evil, the Declaration of Independence is evil, we need to get rid of the First Amendment, it's racist. The Second Amendment is clearly white supremacy, so we need to get rid of that as well. Isn't that sort of like the slippery slope of what the Marxist public school system is doing to our country?
Yeah, well, that's what everything's all about. And they hate the Bill of Rights. I mean, it's really remarkable what when you peel back the onion of what the people in power care about. And you see the lengths they go to limit speech, right? And they create all these categories. They say hate speech, racism, anti-Semitism. They could call it a million different things, but the power structure doesn't want us to be able to speak, because when we speak, people get closer to the truth. They're inherently drawn to it like moths to a light. And the closer people get to the truth, the more they begin to rebel against the power structure, because it's rooted in lies. And you see how everything was on the internet, right? Before the last year and a half, 2 years. And say what you want about Elon Musk, I certainly have questions about who he really is. And for example, I run one small company, and I could get out like 4 tweets a day, and that's all I have time for. And allegedly he's running some of the biggest companies in, the world. And the guy just tweets nonstop all day, just staring at his phone. I don't know if that jives, but regardless of, who he really is or what he might be, what he has done, or the front of Elon Musk has done to free speech. And I know it's not free speech, but it's a lot closer. It's a lot closer. And even the guys that say that, oh, free speech, they don't let me talk about, that little nation that shall not be mentioned, right? You think that, but for people that were awake 5, 6, 7 years ago, that were awake to this stuff, the reason the majority of people had no idea about it is because you couldn't even utter it. You couldn't even breathe it, right? So we have gotten so much closer toward free speech. And with that, you've just seen renaissance and human awakening. And you see everything with U.S. aid, all of that stuff. All of it is designed to stifle free speech.
Absolutely.
Right? You saw, Pavlov, the founder of Telegram, when he was arrested in France? Well, that comes from the United States. That comes from us, right? And I don't trust. I have to preface these things, because everyone makes everyone into idols, and I don't do that at all. Right. I could be like, I really like what Musk has done, and but I'm I don't trust him at all. But that's not the point. I don't make people into idols. I just, what is this behavior? What is that behavior? Do I like it? So JD Vance, who I don't trust at all. I know people say, oh my God, he's, I don't trust him at all. At
least he was a Marine.
Trump. He's not Trump. But what I will say is he went in front. He was in Europe right after Trump got elected, and he gave a speech in front of the European power structure in which he absolutely railed into them about all of the policies related to speech, how they had been arresting people for, sending tweets and writing things on the internet. And America, that is what makes America great. That is, people laugh at the whole Ronald Reagan thing or whatever, but that's America really is a shining city on a hill when it's America. And the people of the world, what people in the world would do to have a First Amendment, where you see these countries like in England and Australia, and how people just get arrested for calling out what the government does. Here you just get banned and debanked, right? Because the government can't do it, so they have to use corporations to do it.
Well, it's not as bad as it was. Before Elon, they created a false impression that the majority of Americans supported all the stifling of speech, and now we know that people inside of government, FBI and CIA, was working with the Biden administration to shut people's accounts down if they spoke out against Joe Biden or the Obamas, right? That's what was going on. So at least now we have a little bit more freedom. I think that's what you're getting at, right?
Yeah. And you see the impact of that. And it's so worth defending, and it's the power structure. And to get back to your original question, that's it. The power structure hates it, and they hate that. They hate the Second Amendment. They don't like that we're armed. We talked about the school shootings, which again, I just love to point out because no one points it out. Why did they keep happening at schools? Because the socialization is really bad. and you see the anxiety in schools, you see the depression, you see the suicide rates, which have gone through the roof, have skyrocketed for young people in these schools. You know, just an absolute nightmare, But when they, and this just adds to it, this is by design. So they say, oh, we have these problems with the shootings, which, and by the way, we can get into like the FBI's grooming of people to do it and the role that pharmaceuticals play.
And Brett, just as an aside, almost every recent school shooting has been by one of these gender dysphoric kids. Have you noticed that?
There's been a lot of that, and they cover that up. And of course, I mean, these are, it's very sad because these are mentally ill kids, right? And like the gaslight they've always done is they said, oh, look how many of these kids commit suicide when they talk about, the gender situation. And they're like, oh, it's because society is mean to them. No, it's not. It's because they're suffering from a mental illness. They've convinced themselves, or people have convinced them, that their body doesn't reflect who they are. I mean,
just
right?
Insane.
So of course there's a mentally ill people and they're struggling, and that leads to a lot of them committing suicide. And the gaslight is, no, it's your fault. When in reality, it's the ones that are affirming that, right? Someone comes to you, they're like, oh, I think my arm is just terrible. It's not my arm. I should cut it off. If you're like, yeah, you should cut your arm off, you're a piece of shit, right? You the right answer is, okay, all right, I know you feel that way, but your arm is your arm, and let's get you some help, right? Let's get you some help. Maybe you need to talk to someone, but you need help, and not that. Don't cut the arm off. Anyone knows that, right? That's common sense. Anyway, I forgot where I was going with that, but the point is that, it's just all gaslighting and whatnot.
Well, the original premise of the show was to get into understanding homeschooling. Let's get back on track, because now people have an idea of, we kind of led them. We're coming back full circle now. They have an idea of where we stand when it comes to public education and who's really in control of the minds of our kids, which is the parents. But the pushback from many people is that, but they won't be properly socialized. And so I know it's late for you. I know you're clear across the country. I think we're 3 hours difference. I'm in the Pacific coast. So, and I know you have a huge family and you got responsibility. So this is the most important part of the show, guys. So Brett, what are some ideas that you have, including Cubs to Bears and your organization and what you do as an educator, to dissuade these parents from thinking that their kids won't be socialized? And what can we do to make sure that we can convince them that they can be socialized without going to a public school?
I'll do you one better. If you want to test out homeschool, now's the best time to test it out, because it's the summer, right? So you homeschool over the summer and you see how it works, and you see how it works for your family. And I think what you'll find is that socialization really isn't a concern at all. So like I said, my children attend a co-op every Tuesday and Thursday. They're with 50 kids each. And they're all homeschooled kids, and they run around, and it's great. And they have friends, and we have play dates, and they're in jujitsu, and they're in sports, and they're all over town. And I have the privilege of interacting with homeschool students all the time. And it's night and day how much more impressive socially they are than public school students. It's like when you have been able to see the lens through my eyes of being in public schools and then being the homeschool guy, because I get to interact with the kids, it's like laughable when they try this, like, oh, but what about the socialization? Like, what are you talking about? The homeschool kids are better socialized.
Brett, address this comment up here. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think this is really important. I think a lot of it has to do with just laziness of the parents themselves.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of parents do. I don't want to bash on parents, but a lot of parents do use it as daycare. A lot of parents want to homeschool or want to do private school, and they incorrectly feel that they're not able to do it, but they would be. And one of the things that I like the most is I haven't just built a curriculum, I built a community. So we have thousands of parents inside our community. They're homeschool parents, and they're very supportive of one another. We have like our own social network inside of a Discord. But getting back to what I was saying, if you're worried about homeschooling, you're thinking about homeschooling, try out homeschooling. And this summer, not to shamelessly plug my own thing, but I will, because in my opinion, we have the most based and red-pilled education company in not only the United States of America, but the entire world. And I stand by that statement. And if you could find one that's more than mine, then I'll retract the statement. But I don't think anyone can. And this summer, we are running live classes 5 days a week. We run live classes over Zoom. And there's hundreds of homeschool kids in the classes, and they all interact with each other, and they really love it. But over the summer, we're running art classes, science classes. We're doing a scientific observation series, and the children are actually guided to do the activities outside where they're going to be in nature doing things and then coming back and talking about it. So it's a really cool model. We've been running our nature unit study, which is on gardening and all that type of stuff. And again, the students do it, and then they meet up and talk about it. And we're adding new courses over the summer, a first aid course, which is being taught by a firefighter. And this children are going to learn the Heimlich. They're going to learn CPR, how to properly care for a wound, and all of these different survival skills directly from a firefighter. We are having our first course. This is for middle school and high school on Intro to Latin, which I'm really excited about. Latin's really important because all of our legal terms, and Michael could talk about this, all of our medical terms,
absolutely,
and the language of the founders. Like if you look at the Great Seal of the United States of America, it's in Latin. And then there's so many benefits because it's a root language. So that's where Spanish and Italian, everything comes from Latin. And students that, even from an academic level, students that learn Latin almost always score a lot better on the SAT, which is an important college entry exam if you want your kids to go to college, or they want to go to college. They score a lot better on the SAT because Latin's the root language. So when they get to the English section, even if there's words they've never seen before, which is common with the SAT, it doesn't matter because they understand the Latin roots of how the words put together, and they're able to get the answer right anyway. So they do a lot better on the SAT. And then we have Intro to Homesteading, which is our last course. I have Mother Hen's Homestead. If you don't follow her on Instagram, go check her out. 650,000 followers. She is a legend. She homesteads and she posts about her life. She's going to be teaching an Intro to Homestead course. So between the homesteading, the gardening, the Latin, the first aid, the art, right? The children are going to be learning a lot of skills for the summer. And when I talk about what an education should actually focus on, it should focus on critical thinking, the development of skills, and real world experience, right? So if you want to try that out this summer, and again, I don't care. I shamelessly plug. I don't care. I set Michael up. We're $30 a month to join. You want to try it out. I set Michael up with his own discount code before this. So hopefully it works. If not, sorry, but I hope it works. Eline Law discount code. You get 20% off the first month, and you try it out. And then on top of that, you get access to not just the live classes, but all of the pre-recorded courses we have. So the course I teach on the American Revolution, the Bill of Rights, the Founding Fathers, U.S. Civics, How to Defend Your Rights, Intro to the Logical Fallacies, Critical Thinking and Discernment, in which I actually write 2 fake newspapers, which are much more real than anything you'll see in the New York Times or the Washington Post. I write 2 fake newspapers. I make fake primary and secondary sources. So like it's fictional. So it's the Forest Bureau of Investigation, right? And they go through those sources. And then what the students do is they read each newspaper article for logical fallacies. They identify the logical fallacies. They fill out a finding fallacy chart. They identify each source for a primary or secondary source, and then they evaluate the source for themselves. They determine if they think it's a good or a bad source, because the truth is only you could determine if something is a good or bad source. And we could set criterion of what we're generally looking for, but 2 very intelligent, well-educated people might look at the same source and interpret it differently, and that's okay, right? We're teaching them to think for themselves. So we have them filling out the logical fallacy sheets, we have them doing the sourcing, and then we have them filling out discernment charts. I know and how I know, I think I know and why I think that, I heard and where I can look. And then, so you get access to all of that. Then you get all of the lesson plans, all of the unit studies that we have posted to Homeschools Connected, which there's just a ton. I think it's like over 600 different lesson plans that I have on there at this point. So if you want to try that out, if you're thinking about homeschool, try it over the summer. See how you like it. And then you'll know, okay, this is something we could go forward with, or you'll say, you know what, maybe this isn't something I like. I don't want to go forward with homeschool. I'll go back to the public school system. Or maybe you'll say, I like homeschool, but that guy Brett sucks. He talks a good game, but he didn't back it up. And then you can go try someone else's thing, and you could try out and see what works for you. But you just jump in, you try it. And the reason I promote it this way is because I know you're going to love it. So that's it.
All right. Well, the bottom line is, I'll just share with my audience, first of all, you definitely need to get involved and learn as much as you can about what Brett's up to and watch all of his Cubs to Bears videos, classical learner videos. And classical education really is, Brett, correct me if I'm wrong, but classical education is the key to critical thinking, right?
Yeah. So in classical education, so if you look at, you want to talk about like the Rockefellers, like how their children are educated, ironically, right?
Ironically.
They receive a classical education, which breaks learning down into 3 phases of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. By the way, anyone who wants to read about this, there is a 35-page book. It's magnificent. The Lost Tools of Learning. You could get it, audiobook it tonight. You could read it in 30 minutes, 30-page book.
Wow.
The Lost Tools of Learning by Dorothy Sayers. Grammar, logic, and rhetoric. The grammar phase is the basically up to 4th or 5th grade, and it's about learning the rules of language. It's about learning to define your terms. Like when we talked about the Reese Committee earlier, right? And I said they had to define what are un-American activities, any means to alter the laws of the United States of America not intended by the Constitution, right? When you enter, like if you go into the Princeton debate team, the first thing they would teach the debate team is that you have to force your opposition to define their terms when they use a word. Because if you don't force them to define their terms, they could bend the word and they could shift its meaning. There's a really manipulative guy on X, this guy James Lindsay, who totes himself as an academic. And this guy, James Lindsay, he started this term, the woke right, right? And what he does is he says, all right, yeah, the woke right. It's look at these people. They just hate Jews. And like, yeah, that's not cool. You shouldn't hate Jewish people. Everyone's an individual. You shouldn't hate Muslim people. You shouldn't hate Jewish people. You shouldn't hate Christian people. People are people, right? So like he'll point to that subset and say, look, it's just hatred. It's just bad. And then he slowly bends the definition to the point where anyone who criticizes the activities of AIPAC, anyone who criticizes the activities and the things that the government of Israel does, he says, oh, look at them. They're so filled with hate, woke right. He's bending the definition. And if you don't know to force him to define his term, then it's very difficult for, I always like that scene in Batman where Batman's fighting Bane. And Batman tries to like do he throws the poppers down, the flashing light, and Bane's like, theatrics, tricks, powerful to the uninitiated, but we are initiated. And then Bane breaks his back. And well, it's kind of like that with logic, right? And people who don't know to force Lindsay to define his terms, I wanted to throw that in there, by the way. The guy just bothers me. I've been itching on X. I'm like, I don't like to get into the spats, but I'm like, man, I really want to get at him. I don't like him. So anyway, this weasel, and he bends the term, and that's how we use it, right? So grammar phase is you got to force people to define their terms. And then the logic phase, that's what I kind of just talked about, which is logical thinking, like ABC logic. And then, of course, you have the logical fallacies. An ad hominem attack is an attack on an individual person rather than an argument, right? A straw man argument where you pretend someone said something they didn't say, and then you attack what they didn't say and act as if you had just disproven them, right? So that's the logic phase, and it's typically taught like 4th, 5th to 8th grade. It's different with every student because it's depending on their level, right? But you have grammar, logic, and then rhetoric. And most of the language you hear from politicians is a rhetoric. And the political class is all trained in this. The elite class is trained in rhetoric because it's about using and invoking emotions to win crowds of people, right? So we've all seen this. Trump and Obama are very good rhetoricians, right? Trump, we're going to build a wall. Obama, hope and change, right? These are things that invoke emotions in people, right? Like, and why I say build a wall with Trump. And by the way, the nature, just using rhetoric doesn't make you bad. I use rhetoric all the time. It's how you use it. So like every Republican for the last 20 years has been like, we need to secure the border. And we're like, you're full of shit. And we know you're full of shit. And then Trump came along and he was like, we're going to secure the border. We're going to build a wall. And Mexico is going to pay for it. Right. And so he comes along and you can connect with a wall. You can envision a wall. It's persuasive. You can see it. Right. And that channeled into America. Right. That channeled into America in a way that those other politicians weren't able to do. Obama does the hope and change. And then Obama's great at it. This is where Obama's really great at rhetoric. Like when he talks about someone like Trump or whatever, like, how hard is it to say that you're against white supremacy? Why can't you just say you're against the KKK? Right? And what he's doing is he doesn't have to say like, oh, yeah, this guy's all about white supremacy, right? Just by asking the question, he rhetorically made the accusation, right? So these are the type of things we deal with all the time, but to the uninitiated, it's difficult to see because we're not trained in it in the public school system. So grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and that's the classical education. So it's absolutely something that everyone should understand and something that I try to help teach.
Well, Brett, I'm really grateful for you coming on, and I know that our time is drawing short here, but I just really quickly wanted to share again with my audience about socialization. So Brett has invited you to check out some of the stuff that he does, and I've got a link up there for anyone.
Do the link, and make sure if you don't use the link, then type in the discount code Eline Law.
Oh, okay. EHLINELAW.
All one word. Your last name, Law. That works for the monthly subscription. I don't know. I don't have the tech yet to do it for the yearly or annually. So if you're doing the monthly, but if you click on Michael's link, then that covers it. You click on his link because I want him to get credit for you signing up. And then what's really cool about my program is I just launched this affiliate program 2 weeks ago. I've been trying to build it all year. I have poured a lot of money, time, and effort into getting this built. So I'm really happy. I just launched it. I haven't released it to a lot of people, but Michael's a friend and it's a good test ground for it. What I really love about it is you not only get access to the homeschool program, your kids get a great education. You help support what I'm doing, right? Because obviously you're paying me a subscription. You support what I'm doing so that I can hire more teachers. Like I'm running live classes now 5 days a week. It's remarkable from where we started from. I'm paying all these people, right? I'm paying people to make these, I'm doing all this stuff. And right. So, and a lot of expenses that go into running the company. So obviously you're supporting that. But on top of that, you're supporting Michael because I don't just pay him for the initial sign up. As long as you remain in the program with Classical Learner, and hopefully until your kid's 18, if I do a good job, right? As long as you remain in the program, a portion of each month's payment will go to Michael as long as you sign up through him. And I really love that because it allows you to support me, it allows you to support him, and it allows you to support the building of a better education system. And as I have been trying to get the message out, because everyone's like, oh, DOE, Department of Education, we will rebuild the education system better in the private sector, better than the government ever could.
I 1,000,000% agree with that. And it's all part of your parallel systems concept. It's not yours, but you're the one that's really revived the parallel systems thing. And I share that with my audience so much that if we really do care about changing the country, we need to form parallel systems where we work together as a team. And, like James Forbes, if he has a business, we need to buy from him. If you have an organic dairy farm, we need to buy from you. I'll pay additional money on top of what you would pay at a Whole Foods to make sure that I support people who believe in patriotism and the commonality of being a true American. And this whole socialization thing, just if I can just share quickly with my audience while you're doing your thing there, Brett. So you parents who are concerned about your kids not being properly socialized, I think that the public school system itself is an argument against that type of socialization. Why would you want your kids to be socialized at a place that basically teaches hatred of country and hatred of people based on skin color? It's ridiculous. And like I do the judo with my son. I help him with his newaza and randori because I'm a judoka myself. I teach him Muay Thai. I've had him read the code of the samurai. He understands to bow when you go to the dojo. He's learning respect for his elders. And he's learning from other kids who have a similar value system because their parents are also bringing them there. So you can actually form this parallel system by getting your kids involved in sports and doing athletic activities with them outside of a public school. Right, Brett? I mean, isn't that the whole point? Is that homeschooling isn't just about having your kid be home. It's about having them be part of your life and seeing what you do for work. Like I've taken my daughter to court with me. She's gotten her picture taken with judges. In fact, the judge at Fullerton Court was a congressman who Adam Schiff knocked him out. And so he took his judgeship back. So I had my daughter get a picture taken with him so she could see what daddy does for work. And so it actually motivates them to learn how to run their own business and be free as opposed to going to college and becoming a professional communist barista at Starbucks. Right, Brett?
Yeah, I made one of my many social media pages, but I have the Homeschools Connected Instagram page, which doesn't have a lot of followers on that one, but it's just kind of more basic education stuff. My other pages, I do the gravy. But I made a meme for it, and I used ChatGPT. And the meme was a bird in a cage. The cage was outside, the bird's in the cage, and the cage said public school on it. And then there was the birds standing outside of the cage and a bunch of birds flying in the sky. And then the whole world, right? The whole world, it just said homeschool. And that's the difference. Homeschooling, people think like they have this idea, oh, homeschooling's at home. Like homeschooling's everywhere. I know people that do world school. I know people, we have people in our community that are literally spend their childhood and with their kids, obviously parents and the kids, traveling all around the world. That's all they do. So they don't just read about places. They're just going everywhere, going museums everywhere, tourist stuff everywhere. And that's, I mean, talk about a great education. I mean, talk about a worldly person, right? They just spend their childhood traveling the whole world.
Like I take my kids to El Salvador and we visited the pyramids because their mother is Salvadorian, and they can just work remotely on their laptop and learn Spanish, become cultured. They're not stuck in this. And this basically, in my opinion, is nothing less than a prison.
And then there's the aspect of it of even the schoolwork itself. Like people have this notion that like, oh, 8 hours of schoolwork. It does not take nearly that amount of time to get done each day what has to be done. It's like, it's actually pretty quick. So
my daughter does 2 to 3 months of schoolwork in 2 weeks. And then I'll let her have and I'll give her a couple of weeks off to do whatever she wants. If she does that, she'll have her Associate of Arts, I think within the next couple of months, if things work out. And I'm going to have her on the law office study program, studying to be a lawyer under me. There's no age requirement. She could be the youngest lawyer in the state of California if this works out, Brett. I mean, this is just an amazing thing that parents really need to get into. And I'm encouraging all of you guys to share this with your friends. I think that Brett has the most significant patriotic pro-family program that there is out there. And I definitely think you should look more into Cubs to Bears books and Classical Learner. Brett, is there anything else that you want to share with us before we close it out?
No, just that, you have the opportunity, and we're very blessed to have the opportunity to be the driver of the culture your children grow up in. And everyone should take that seriously. And I always say that only a fool would allow his enemies to educate his kids. And we don't have to. We don't have to. And people are figuring that out in droves. And we have 3.7 million people homeschooling in America right now. And that number is not getting smaller. It's going up and up
bigger.
and up.
The single party state of California, I think, is the biggest driver of homeschooling in the country. The Marxist run state of California, we fled California. Almost all of my friends who are inactive U.S. Marines like myself, they split, and they're homeschooling their kids now. It's a phenomenon, Brett. And I just think that you're really onto something, man. And I'm very, very grateful that you came on my show tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And we'll talk. I got some things I have to talk to you about. So.
All right, brother. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close out. Everybody give me a bunch of ones for Brett for showing up for us. And I'm going to have you on every once in a while. Again, Brett, I'm super grateful again. And with that being said, guys, let me just say goodbye to everybody. Mountain Mover, What's the Matter You, James Forbes, Rhine Labs, all you guys, thanks for showing up. Life Under the Microscope, thanks for promoting Brett. Ex-Bootlicker, love having you. Mountain Mover, Jody Shiloh, all my good buddies, thanks for supporting the channel. And look, I know it wasn't, one of my Cop Watcher shows where we get 1,000 viewers, but this is stuff that's really, really important and near and dear to my heart, that you rescue your children from this sinister, sick system of so-called education that is warping the minds of God's children. We need to take this country back by freeing the minds of our children from this travesty. And with that being said, Brett, go ahead and say your goodbyes, and I'm going to close this out.
Yeah, if anyone wants to find what I do, www.classicallearner.com. That's classicallearner.com. And I'm Classical Learner on Instagram. I'm also Cubs to Bears books if you're into a little bit more of the gravy. It's a little more Michael knows, a little more controversial stuff on Cubs to Bears books on Instagram. And I'm like Classical Learner everywhere. On X, I'm Classic Learner. And just go to the website. It's all the little icons just there.
Yeah, and with that being said, make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure to save, because we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel. Semper Fi, do or die.